Today is Wednesday, September 9th, 2015. Joe Turner and myself, Judy Meyer, are talking to Peggy Kilby. Is that correct?
You forgot the other name.
Oh, there's another name, and what is it?
Branneky.
Branneky. Branneky as in the Branneky hardware store family?
Yes, indeed.
Oh, okay. And you will tell us how you're related to them.
Well, that's part of my program today, isn't it?
Okay, good.
When I say that I'm a Branneky, Peggy Branneky was my maiden name. There's a whole mess of Brannekys, and what is interesting is it's hard to find somebody in the Pattonville area, Bridgeton, that is not related to a Branneky, either by...
Right, Joe's wife is one of them.
Right. Either there's a little twig on your tree somewhere, there's a Branneky involved. And the interesting thing is, of the immigrants that came over were Wilhelm and Wilhelmina, only they came over from Germany around the 50s, 1850s, like so many other people did. And they weren't married at the time. Wilhelmina is from the Duchy of Hanover, and Wilhelm Branneky, spelled different then too. He's from the Prussia area, but they're both northern Germany. So they're, and whether they came over at different times, so they didn't know each other when they came over here, and obviously they met, and in the area, and what I think is so interesting is, I know you can't read this, but in 1856, well, they decided to get married, obviously, and they took their buggy or whatever they had at the time, and they went into town. I guess town was, I'm thinking Clayton or St. Louis, and they, Wilhelm got his naturalization papers that day, and in order to be naturalized, he had to have lived in the United States for 5 years and be a resident of Missouri for 1 year, which he was, maybe more. Anyway, Minnie, her name was Wilhelmina, but they called her Minna, was a short name. That same day they got married, they found a traveling preacher named Christopher Jung, and I guess they had things like that, itinerant preachers that traveled around and did what they had to do at the time. So they had 5 children that lived. They had a couple that died. And Sophia, one girl and 4 boys. Sophia was the oldest. And then we have Henry and William and Charles and Louis. And this guy right here, Charles, Christian was his name, that was C.C. Branneky.
Okay.
And that's going to bring us to the store. It's well documented in the Bridgeton's papers and all, how the store started across the street from where it wound up being at Fifi and St. Charles Rock Road. And that store burned and so on like that. Let me describe Pattonville a little bit to you. There wasn't much to it. Picture in your mind, now that's still there, St. Charles Rock Road and Fifi Road, that corner. And still there's Mizpah Church is there, and the Fifi Baptist Church is over here. And then there was a big old lovely home here called the Lucas Home, and that's documented in your papers too. And that was torn down, unfortunately, not that, maybe 10 years ago. And now a Walgreens there, just what we need, another Walgreens. Anyway, across the street from the store, from Lucas's, was the store that I remember. I'm going to show you a picture. Okay, so I'm backing up here. Here was Lucas's, and next to that was a Texaco filling station to get our 10 cents a gallon gasoline. And next to that was a little white building that was a barber shop. There was always pretty much of a barber there. Then there was Raymond Avenue came in, and that's still there. And this, at that time, I barely remember it because it was torn. There was a big building there where well, Sharp's Restaurant later
Okay.
was, and
Mhm.
I don't know what all's there now. But it was a long building, at least it seemed long to me. Had a lot of windows in it. It was like a dance hall or a public place where they would have an orchestra and their weddings maybe. I remember going there when I was, I don't know, 12 or something. And I went with a girlfriend, and my mom and dad were there. I guess it was a wedding, I don't know. But I felt really grown up, and I was going to wear hose, my first pair of, nylons.
Yes.
And I didn't know how to do it, and I had a girlfriend, Betty Hudson, and she had an older sister. So therefore, Betty knew everything because she had this older sister.
Right.
I didn't have an older sister. And she showed me how to use, this is stupid to say on a program like this, but we had garter belts
Oh,
then.
sure.
Oh, gosh, were they
Right.
awful.
I remember the garter belts.
Okay. But anyway, that got torn down in Sharp's Restaurant. And if you went down just a little bit further, there was the Kilby place. It was a lovely white home.
Wait a minute. Down which way? Down on Raymond or St. Charles Rock Road?
St. Charles Rock Road, and it would be heading west.
Okay.
It was about a 1/10 of a mile from the store.
Okay.
And it's important that I mention this because another story I want to tell you involves the Kilbys.
Right.
Okay, so then I don't know if we can do this, but I want to talk about the store a little bit because it was my love.
And can you just tell us first, though, how you're related, your branch of the Branneky family?
I have that on my agenda here.
Oh, good. Good.
C.C. Branneky married Catherine Kleeman. The Kleemans lived around Dorset and Fifi, more in Maryland Heights area. And anyway, they married and lived above the store, and they had 4 children. The oldest girl, Edna, and then came Walter, and then Oliver, and then Harry. Harry was my father.
Okay.
So the others were aunts and uncles. And just to show you how small town Pattonville was, Edna Branneky married Frank Banker. So the Bankers family and the Brannekys, there's a lot of intermarriages there. It's really a difficult family tree to try to put on paper or to tell anyone about. And I'm going to go back to the town of Pattonville for a minute. It was such a typical USA, America town. Everybody knew everybody, and if somebody was sick or ill, they had casseroles immediately at their house. You didn't lock your house, you just walked in and put the casserole on the table.
Really? Wow.
You knew all the kids because they were your friends. You knew who had this dog, whose dog that was and whose cat that was. You knew all this. And I worked in the store when I was old enough, which was a thrill to me.
How old do you
Couldn't
think
wait.
you were? When you say old enough, how old were you?
When I started working at the store, 8, 10. I didn't do anything important.
What? When you were before?
Oh, sacking potatoes and stupid stuff. I just wanted to be there. I didn't get paid.
What, can you define the time period for us here?
Okay, I was born at 19. We didn't get that little mess over with. I was born May 27th, 1931, and you don't have to use your fingers. It makes me 84. Okay, and I went to Fayetteville Grade School, which was behind, on Fifi Road, behind the store, about a 1/10 of a mile. And I went to Pattonville High School, which was across from what Northwest Plaza used to be, down there by that cemetery.
Right, and
So
the middle
that's-
school or junior high is there.
That's where I went to school and all that kind of stuff. And in Pattonville, our store, the store was about 3 blocks from where my house was. I was born and raised on Midview Avenue, which is still there, but the house is still there, but it doesn't look real good right now. It doesn't look anything like it did. But it was fun living there because the bus went right by the Rock Road there, and you could catch the bus right in front of Lucas's house, and I could, my mom could give me 25 cents on a weekend. I had a girlfriend at St. John's at the time, still do, and it would be a nickel each way on the bus, and 10 cents to get in the show, and a nickel for a candy bar. A quarter, she got rid of us all day long.
Wait a minute, which direction did you go? Did you go downtown or did you go to St. Charles?
Well, St. John's is east on the Rock Road.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you went east.
Yeah, and if you didn't get off at St. John's, you could go all the way to Wellston. And in Wellston, you could get off the bus and catch a streetcar at the Hodemont perhaps and go downtown, get off on Grand Avenue. You had a way.
You would have gone all the way downtown from being out in Bridgeton?
Sure. Yeah, until I got a car, and then it was a whole new world. Woo!
Wow, well, you were ahead of the game if you had a car.
You bet. Okay, I want to get back to the store. And I don't know that this is going to take very good. You've seen this picture a lot. An awful lot. Okay, but I think this photo was taken, I don't know. I think it was taken in the early 40s, maybe 39. And this is the grocery store over here. And over here was the post office and dry goods, thread and bolts of material in the post office. I said, this sign right here says Post Office, Pattonville. And the center part was basically all hardware and horse collars and nails and stuff like that. And then over here was the grocery side. This door right here, I've got a story to tell you about the door. There's a something secret about it. But first I'm gonna do this. And then I'm gonna come back to the first picture. This is the store also. This is a shorter store because our grocery part isn't added on yet. This was taken in World War I, during World War I.
Which would have been what years?
Well, the war ended in 1918, so it was taken, and it was, I think, a 4-year war, I think.
Probably.
Yeah. And this was paved, it looks like. But you'll notice, if you were to count these pillars here, you would see that there's 2 more added on over here. Now, up above, what a lot of people don't know, all of this up here was living quarters.
Well, thank you. I was wondering about that.
Grandma and Grandpa Branneky lived up there. And then this is Fifi Road, goes on like that. That was a big store. It went way back a bit too. And there was porches like that. And there were 2 families that lived up here. Well, first of all, Grandma and Grandpa. And this door here went straight up the steps to the 2nd floor. And when you got to the top of the steps, if you took a right, this room right here was a parlor. It was dark and gloomy, and it was cold when I was there, and cold, it was Christmas and all. Us kids had to go over to the parlor and play games to get out of there, you know.
Right.
So it was cold, so we would. It was just, the chairs were uncomfortable. We hated that room. Anyway, if you turn right, this is all where Grandma lived. This was sleeping porch.
Now, could you tell us again Grandma's name?
Catherine.
And her husband was?
CC.
Cece.
Okay. And then in the back was more living quarters, and that's where Oliver, son number 2, lived, and his wife. And they had Charlie and Jack and Nita, a girl, and they are the ones that now run the hardware store. This wonderful, wonderful store burned down in 1976.
Why do you think, what happened, you know? The
Electrical
cause?
is all that I heard. Electrical fire is what happened. I want you, remember this door?
Yes.
Okay, here's the, over here was the grocery side. And I remember one time I was working, I'll call it, working in the store in the produce department. That's what was right next to it. And I was sacking potatoes or something easy like that. And over in that corner, and I happened to look up and saw motion, and that wall was opening up. And it was a little hidden door in there. It was just part of the wall that was hinged, and the door opened up, my eyes got big, and it was Grandma. She had this little door put in so that she could come down those steps and come in and get a loaf of bread or something she needed. And
Smart woman.
that was pretty amazing. I've talked to some of my cousins and they didn't know about that. So I felt privileged. But this store was where everybody met, especially on Saturdays. That was the busy day. We were closed on Sundays. In those days, you didn't do business on a Sunday. So it was a wonderful, wonderful time.
Can you tell us, excuse me, like what would have been the hours of this store? What would a typical day hours be?
Well, probably about 7 in the morning till back in when Grandfather was alive. It was whenever he got these people to go home, because it was a fun place to be. But basically, we'd close at 6 or 7. And of course, that was before all the modern stores stayed open to 9. So later on, Grandfather, I didn't really know him. I was born in 31, and Grandfather died in 32.
Oh, I see.
So I was about a year and a half old, and I didn't know him.
I see.
He died right above the store.
Really?
In the kitchen.
Oh, my.
It was of an evening, and he and Catherine were getting ready to have their dinner. And he was pouring olive oil from a big container to the little cruet and just collapsed. It was I don't know what they call it, cerebral hemorrhage, or
Right.
They couldn't revive him. And so she got a hold of, Oliver, who lived on the other side of the store. They came running over and they couldn't do anything. And they got a hold of Dr. Coleman, who lived down the Rock Road a little bit on the grounds where the Fifi Church grounds is where his office was. It's a little white building he had, and anyway, got a hold of him, and he was on his way up. And although my mom and brother and all, we lived on Midview Avenue, everybody was there in a matter of minutes, and they couldn't revive him.
So you think it was a heart attack? What we would term a heart attack?
Well, I don't, it had to have been, but it was instant. I mean, It was just, that was it kind of thing.
And how old was he?
63,
Wow. Yeah.
something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And Edna, the oldest girl in that family, my aunt in other words, their firstborn child, Edna, and Elvira, who's her daughter,
Oh, okay.
they had been to Wellston shopping. It was around Christmas, about 2 weeks before Christmas. Snow and all on the ground, and they were coming home, I guess on the bus, and saw all the other cars in front of the store. They knew something had happened, so they got off the bus and went in and to find that what was there. Grandpa apparently was a very warm, friendly, he was well loved. He was a problem solver, and if you needed some money, he'd loan you some money. And if you were having a bad time, you got credit, for your groceries or whatever it was you needed. And everybody that he gave credit to, when things got better, he got paid.
Where is he buried?
Fifi Cemetery.
And his wife?
Fifi.
Okay.
There's a lot of Brannekys buried there.
Yes.
So, but I wanted to tell you something else about the Christmas time. That door in front that I said went straight upstairs.
Yes.
At Christmas Eve, we're Lutheran. We went to church in Maryland Heights at Zion Lutheran Church. Well, the whole Branneky clan did then. And we'd have our little Christmas Eve program where, as a little girl, the little kids got up and said their little piece, and their little Bible verse and sat back down. Anyway, but then we got a little sack with some peanuts and an orange and a Hershey bar in it, That was Christmas Eve at church. And then everybody went home and probably changed clothes. And we went up to Grandma's above the store there. And Grandma, all, the brothers and sisters of that immediate family and their kids and us little kids too, we exchanged gifts. I think they drew names, and we exchanged gifts. And Grandma had a little round tree, seemed to, in the middle, little round table with this tree on it. And as a little kid, oh, that was such a big tree. And I now have the container that she had this little feather tree in, and it's little. I just thought that was the biggest tree. And then we all sat and had, the grown-ups had drinks, I'm sure, and we had our sodas and stuff. And then we'd hear a bell ringing. Oh my goodness, what was that? It was Santa Claus. And Santa Claus would come in that door right from the, and ringing his bell. And when he came, then he would distribute the gifts. And Santa Claus was Otto Kinker. The Kinkers lived in Pattonville too, down from the west of the store, about not even a tenth of a mile. And usually when Otto came as Santa Claus, he had a few Christmas cheers by then.
He had a few.
Boy, Santa Claus doesn't smell too good.
He had some Christmas cheer.
And when my mom and dad got married, and I have a story to tell you about that. They got married in 1927, and they didn't. My mom was from Wellston. Like I said, Wellston used to be nice. It was a good shopping area. It was pretty, and well, anyway, they met.
And what is your father's name?
Harry. Harry, and my mom's name was Pearl, but a nickname of Peggy. That's where I got the Peggy, I guess. Anyway, they dated, and they decided to get married, but they somehow didn't want a big wedding. So one night, they went like a double date. My dad took his cousin, and my mom had a girlfriend in Wellston. And the four of them, they went over to Illinois and had prearranged with somebody over there and secretly got married. And then they didn't tell anybody about it. Mom went home and Dad went home and everything. It was about 2 weeks went by, and it hit the fan about then. They left to go on a honeymoon and left notes behind.
Oh my.
And my dad had this was in 27, and he had a cream-colored Chrysler Roadster convertible.
Wow.
The rumble seat in the back type of thing.
Oh, wow.
And I've got pictures of that too. And he left a note for his mom saying that what they just all got married and stuff like that. I got the notes, the original, that was handwritten. And something about the house on Midview was it was brand new, it was being built. It would be finished when they got home from their honeymoon. So when they came home, they had a house.
Wow, that was nice.
It was. And in order to, they were going to go to California out west.
That's a long honeymoon.
Oh yeah, well it's a good thing they stayed away a little while. And they went down to the Kilby house, which, as I said, was west of the store, about a tenth of a mile. And the Kilbys had just been on a trip out west, and they had a map.
Oh.
So they stopped by the Kilby house to get the map. The roads were pretty bad at that
this
time.
was in the
dirt roads, and there'd be maybe a fork in the road, and you'd follow there'd be an arrow maybe on that tree, and you went that way. It was not at all like anything you would remember in our times. And then he left another note for his father, my grandfather, C.C., telling about business. My dad was butcher at the store.
Your dad was the butcher?
My dad was the butcher. And he was telling Grandpa about he'd hired some friend of his, somebody he knew, to come in and take his place. And my dad paid him, and he would be there at 7 o'clock Monday morning or whatever that was. And that he'd order a side of beef, and George will know how to do that, and he had that all taken care of. Well, guess what? This good friend never showed up.
Oh no!
Grandpa had to get behind. I don't know what he did.
Oh no!
So, and Grandma, oh my God, my little boy,
How old was your father when he
When they got
Eloped.
married, I think 23,
Okay.
22, something like that. So, and then the two grandmas, or well, I don't know, the two mothers, my mom's mother and dad's mother, they, I guess, talked on the phone. I guess they had telephones then. So Grandma Kern, that was my mother's maiden name,
Okay.
took the streetcar from Wellston to Pattonville because the streetcar ran right behind the store, where there's a right-of-way is still there. But anyway, she could get off right there behind the store and walk up and meet the other mother. Well, they sat upstairs of the store and cried, all about their kids. They didn't get to see a wedding.
Oh.
And they were so upset that they had to have a little glass of sherry. So then I guess Grandma went home. By the time my mom and Dad got home from their honeymoon, the dust had settled a little bit. The good thing they waited about 2 weeks and things went along pretty fine that way.
I think we have to remind people that might be watching this that this was the age where no cell phones, and to make a phone call was a big deal, wasn't it?
Yes, you had to dial the operator to get to where you wanted.
And it's probably very expensive.
Well, it cost something.
I know when I was growing up, a long distance was always
Oh,
expensive.
yeah, really long.
Right.
But living in Pattonville, I had girlfriends in Wellston. I had girlfriends in St. John's. And you had to still do the operator. It was like Wabash 314. You know, it was a prefix.
Right.
Or
right.
Evergreen was another
I
exchange.
had Evergreen.
Yeah, you had to go through all
Let
that.
me ask
And
you.
Mom and Dad got the bill. I mean, but I knew not to, talk too long. Kind of
Right.
thing. And the store, back to that a little bit, my favorite topic, they sold everything. Behind the store was a big red barn. It was big. And that's where they stored like bales of straw and hay and equipment, and the trucks that the store needed were back there. And they had a chute, a wooden chute from upstairs where the hayloft was. You could throw this bale down and it would come down to the ground level. It's like a slide.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not the kind of a slide that kids could use because it was wood.
And
splinters.
splinters. I heard that coming.
Yeah, so that. And,
Did the kids know this before they tried it?
Did what?
Did the kids know this fact before they would try it?
They were told that you usually had to try it because what do they know? You know how that goes. Also on that ground behind the store, there was an orchard. Cherry trees, apple trees, pear trees, and I would go there and climb the trees, and I loved there was the sour cherries that let go. Sour cherries like you use for pies, and I should have gotten sick, but I could just sit up there and just eat those cherries. They were so good.
Now, was this sold at the store, this fruit?
Oh, no, I don't think so.
No?
Given away maybe. Well, maybe they did. Grandpa was pretty enterprising. He might have.
Did your father then resume his duties as butcher then?
Oh yes, everything went back like it was.
Did your mother work at the store?
No, she did not. My mom was a stay-at-home night. Give me a 5 minute.
I had a question.
Yes.
You mentioned several other types of products that Branneky sold, but you haven't said anything about lumber. Did they ever sell lumber in the store?
No, I don't remember lumber. They sold, there was another building just west of the store, part of the property, and that was called the feed store.
Okay.
And in the feed stores, like Purita, chicken mash, and whatever else was in there, corn, cracked corn, and salt blocks, and all chicken feeders with, if you raised your own chickens, which most everybody did. So you get the eggs and the chickens too.
That seems to be a popular thing now. A lot of people are going back to that raising
Well,
chickens.
it's about time we woke up, I'll tell you. It certainly is. And then there was always a question with some of your other interviewers about whether the store had a basement or not. Oh, it did. It was a full basement.
Really?
And in the back, in the very center, was the hardware store. And then in the back of the hardware store, the very back of the building, that's where the office was. It wasn't a huge office, but there was room for 2 desks, my dad, and it opened to the grocery side and had doors all over the place. And below it in the basement, underneath of the office, there was like a little room, but you could get to it from the basement. There was a stone walls. And down there, of course, I went down there too, and that's where they kept, seemed to me, that's where they kept all their old ledgers, which were all written in hand and calligraphy. Oh, to have that handwriting. And the prices were something else. But my dad had a little printing press down in that room.
Really?
And he would type up little flyers, grocery store things. I remember I had a couple of them, and I've still got one left in my album. Spare ribs, 10 cents a pound.
Wow.
A dozen eggs was 18 cents. And they had Fells Naphtha soaps. I mean, all, the prices were reflective of how things were at the time. So it was good. Branneky's also sold whiskey in barrels, 3 barrels, 1X, 2X, and 3X.
What did the X stand for? I'm sorry, I
Aging.
don't know. See, I'm sorry, I don't know this stuff.
3X's was the good stuff.
Oh.
And they called it thrashing whiskey. Now the Kilbys, who I married a Kilby, the Kilbys would keep thrashing whiskey in their basement for thrashing time. Well, there must have been an awful lot of thrashing going on in Pattonville because people were in buying it when they thrash, what's the wrong time of year.
And thrashing has to do with the harvesting?
Yeah.
So
thrashing.
why was whiskey thrashing?
Well, the help would come from, maybe it was your turn to harvest, Joe, and so they'd all go over to Joe's and help do the harvesting. And of course, they expected a meal too, and some whiskey, or they helped each other. So you had to treat these workers. But the thrashing whiskey mysteriously evaporated, it seemed like. So that was kind of.
Who was in charge of the post office? Do you remember?
I do. The post office was put in, I don't know the year, but it was at the store like we mentioned. And C.C., my grandfather, was the postmaster. And after he died, Walter, the next son, was postmaster.
His brother.
C.C.'s son.
Oh, Cece's son.
Oldest son.
Okay, so that would have been your uncle.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then was Oliver was third to be postmaster. Elvira, my cousin Edna's daughter, worked at the post office, but she was not a post official.
Oh.
She was an employee.
Oh, well, these post office people, were they just kind of self-appointed, or did you have to get the appointment from some kind of?
I think you had to be appointed to be a
I would think so.
postmaster
I would think so.
kind of thing.
And they provided the place for it.
Mm-hmm.
And did people pick up mail there at the post office?
Yes, it was absolutely adorable. It was a little tin front, I guess sitting on a counter of some kind, and it had little lock boxes, but in the front was a little window, kind of like a bank would have. Maybe it could be, and that. Then you could turn your, a combination of about 3 numbers, or if you didn't have that, then you say your name, they'd go through whatever your last initial was, she'd go through there. She already knew what you had, kind of thing. You didn't have any secrets in a small town, no way, No, nothing like that.
How many brothers or sisters did you have?
I have one brother, 3 years older than I am, and he's died some time ago. He died young, and I'm getting close to being the last one of the cousins, that generation left.
Is that right? We know that Jack Branneky just passed away recently, so he was your cousin.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Then his older brother Charlie lived in Florida. He's gone. Well, let's don't get into all that. What else did I want to tell you? Questions?
We'll just talk about school. You said you went to the Fifi grade school. Where'd you go to high school? Oh, you did say you went to the high school.
Now, I'll go back to grade school for a minute. It was an old wooden building, and I think there were 4 rooms. It had a basement and 2 rooms. 2 rooms and 2 rooms. There was an upstairs and a floor level. And the first grade teacher was Mrs. Avery.
Is that why the street is named Avery?
Mrs. Avery was also my father's teacher.
Oh my, she was.
Mrs. Avery was. She was Mrs. Avery.
She stayed around a while. Huh?
Yeah, and something else. The Averys lived down the west of the store too, right about exactly where the interchange is, the cloverleaf that goes to 70 or is, yeah.
Yes.
Right exactly there was the Avery house.
Okay.
And the Averys was Uncle Jim Avery, was that older man lived there. And the Averys are related to the Kilbys. But then I'm getting into genealogy, which is not interesting.
Oh.
But the Avery Exchange was named after Jim Avery.
Okay.
And Jim Avery, at one time, was in partners with C.C. Branneky before this store was built.
Really? Wow.
But Uncle Jim Avery was from Virginia, and Virginia people just didn't work too hard.
Gentleman farmers.
It didn't work out too well. But Uncle Jim Avery and C.C. were great friends, and they did some business ventures together. I think they bought properties and stuff like that. When grandfather died, I did a lot of research on the Branneky family. And you see me pointing over there
Yes.
to these books. There's some albums sitting over there. It's got a lot of copies of things like the naturalization papers that I told you from the original ones that came over. I've got there are copies of things. You could get all these things. But lost my train of thought.
Tell us about when you met your husband.
And what?
Tell us about your husband. Well, you probably knew him growing up, I assume.
Yeah, I did.
Did he go to school with you?
No, Parker was older than I am.
Oh.
He was 20 years older than I am. He signed my high school diploma.
He signed?
He said he had to get me out of high school so he could marry me. Well, anyway.
What kind of work
That
did he do?
He was with Missouri State Highway Patrol.
Oh, really?
And we lived on a farm out in Forestell. It's past Wentzville just a little bit. And I raised 3 boys there. So I've had a good life.
Wonderful.
I want to encourage the younger people that might be watching this to please talk to your older people, grandparents or your parents. I wish I had done this when I was younger. I didn't. Now I'd love to have them right here. I have so many questions that I don't know the answers to.
I understand.
And I would just love to talk to them. I'm so mad at myself. Don't be one of those like me that it's unfortunate that you didn't do that. If you could tape record it, fine. If you could video it like we're doing here, that's good too. Or pencil and paper, whatever you got. How did your mom and dad meet? Where? What was she wearing? What was your favorite date? What did you hate? He must have had an annoying habit. What was it? What was it? That's all makes for good stuff, kind of thing. It really
it's life.
does.
It's life,
So,
yes.
And I applaud the Historical Society for doing what you're doing
Thank you.
and contributing to information that other people will find useful
Thank you.
as time goes on.
Do you get back in, because right now, can you define where we are right now?
Where I am right now?
Where are we sitting right now?
Well,
We're not in Bridgeton any longer.
No, we're in Defiance, Missouri, which is out Highway 94 on the way to Augusta, which everybody knows about, and it's wine country. And I am so fortunate that I live in a log cabin home that was built in 1867. My youngest son, Tim, is in the business of restoring historic homes. And he bought this place for the property, and the house was on it. And he wanted the property more than the house, but anyway, he saw that the house had some good bones, as he said.
Potential.
And it looked pretty awful when he bought it. And he took a year off of work and worked on the house, restored it. So actually, I live in a brand new house. It just so happens I have a new well, new electric, new heaters, new air conditioning, new septic tank, but it's got all these logs around it.
It's very charming, it really is.
Thank you.
When was the last time you actually were in Bridgeton? And
Well, I go by the store, Branneky store. I go by there every so often and talk to Beverly, who is Jack's widow.
yes,
Yeah,
unfortunately,
kind of thing.
yes.
But I miss Pattonville. To me, it's always Pattonville. It's not Bridgeton. I'm
That's
sorry.
interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's that. And Mrs. Lucas that lived in the house across from where the Walgreens is now,
Mhm.
and she owned the property where the Texaco station and along Raymond. She had a lot of property. But she had a barn back there that was the carriage house where her husband was a doctor, but also he made carriages. By carriages, I mean that you put a horse pulls a carriage, you know, kind of thing.
More like a wagon.
A wagon.
Than not the old-fashioned.
It was a wagon master.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh.
it was a wagon person.
Mhm.
But anyway, he died some years back, and she always had out by the barn in the back was a field. She had a cow, I think, for a while. A big stack of wood for burning in the fireplace, I guess. Big, and she loved that wood pile, and she was so afraid that that wood pile would burn down. She just was paranoid about that wood pile. Well, one night, and I won't say who, but some people that are no longer with us, that were residents of Pattonville, saw to it that the wood pile burned.
Oh no.
But she was kind of a cranky old woman. Not that she deserved that, but no one ever admitted it or anything like that. It just burned down.
Oh.
One of those things.
I want to ask you now. We have heard from a couple of people, including Loudowns, that they had a volunteer fire department. Were you aware? Is that when you were growing up?
Yes, it was there, and it was behind the store too, off of Fifi. Behind the store, it's quite a little piece of property. I don't get into that. In fact, the store itself, when Grandpa bought it, just the was 1 acre. But it adjoined, he bought 3.1 more acres, so there's like 4 acres that was there on this piece of property. And most of it's still there as far as I know.
They use a lot
It
for
seems like that's
storage, I
about right.
think.
But then behind, when that acreage ended behind the Fifi Road part, there was another house, a white house. It was the Blackburn house. They lived there. And then behind it was the car tracks. By car tracks, I mean the streetcar that I mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
Then right next to it is where they put the fire department.
So it was on the same side.
As Branneky's
Oh,
on
okay.
Fifi Road,
Okay.
but down behind the store a block.
Okay, I was confused about that, I guess, because of the engine house that's sitting on the other side of the street. I guess I always assumed it was on that side of
Well,
the
it
street.
could have been moved from, you know, rebuilt or something. And when I guess Charlie, Jack's older brother, also my cousin,
Mhm.
Oliver's son, worked at the store there, ran it like at that time. And he was on the fire department. And I guess they got a phone call or a bell or something. And you'd hear the siren going, and Charlie would run out the back door there. And Charlie had long legs, short body but long legs. And here's Charlie, and he could cover some ground. He was almost always the first one there to answer the call. And I don't know what they did from there, but yeah, that was the fire department. Not my earlier days. I guess you probably have that written down somewhere when that started.
We have a couple of videos, but not really. I don't know if we have any written information, but we need to do that.
We've interviewed a number of people that were associated with the
Oh,
volunteer.
yes,
fire.
indeed.
We really
Yes,
would like to get
indeed.
that.
Floyd
Absolutely.
Patton, who still lives on Raymond.
Yeah, yeah. And I worked at the grocery store, as I mentioned, as a little kid doing nothing but being there and listening to all I could, of course. And later on, after I got I always worked on Saturdays when I became older. You know, I was going to high school. But it was worthwhile then. You know, I could work and I loved it.
And you earned money.
Learn what?
Earned money. Did you
Well,
get paid
yeah,
for your?
I got paid for Saturday, working all day Saturday, doing, I don't know, the day went fast because I was busy. I got $5.
Okay, all right.
And so I had spending money. And then after I got out of high school, I didn't, well, that's what I wanted to do. I just started working full time
So you worked full time where?
in the grocery store.
You did.
And, you know, did the ordering and the checking out. And we did the produce department. We had a case, but it wasn't refrigerated then. We had sprayers, like with, you could turn them on, and mist it kind of, you know, but there wasn't refrigeration. So we had to take our grocery carts, and at night when we closed up, put all the lettuce, all the cabbage, and roll it into the back room where we had a big walk-in cooler.
Okay.
By walk-in cooler, I mean it was big,
Yes.
and it had on the whole top of it was these coils that were always full of ice. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you could put a couple carts in there and still get 10 people. I mean, it was big, and it was a big cooler. And then we
Was that
had
a mechanical cooling system, or was it just ice?
For the whole store.
Well, for the area that you're talking about.
Yeah, it was air conditioned later on,
Uh-huh.
much later on. But ceiling fans is what was there earlier. I barely remember going in the store when maybe I just think I remember it, I don't know, but it was always wood floors until recently. And you'd throw this, was a red oily powder called sweeping compound. And you'd throw that around. I didn't, we had somebody did that. And I kept the dust down when you're sweeping it.
Oh.
And then you'd, you know, get rid of that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
But also there was a back door on the Fifi Road side of the building where you could pull back a truck up and unload stuff, you know, for us anyway, for the grocery side. So we did that, and we seemed to be big on trap doors. Also there was a trap door you could open up, in the basement, of course, was down below. But there was a slide too. We're big on slides
Yeah,
too.
sounds like it.
And we'd throw the case goods down there. You know, the case of peas, case of corn, or whatever you had, that went down the basement. And then somebody could be down the bottom of it and, you know, take it off, kind of thing. The basement and the grocery side was full of cases of stuff, you know. And on the hardware side, basement was full of unseasonable things. Like in the summer, there'd be ice skates down there.
Oh, I see.
And there'd be sleds down there
I
in the
see.
summer. You know that. You know how I mean. It was extra storage and stuff like that, and it was pretty mysterious. It was pretty fun as a kid growing up there. It really was.
Well, it's been wonderful talking to you and hearing all your remembrances, and we hope to make a comprehensive video of the history of Bridgeton, so I'm sure we will be asking for your help and advice on that.
We'll see if I can
Thank
help.
you so much.
You're welcome. Bye.